In 1999, a financial analyst sat down at his desk with a calculator and for hours to kill. By the end of that afternoon, he'd cracked something the SEC missed, the biggest banks in the world missed, and thousands of investors managing billions of dollars missed. He was right. But it would take 9 more years and a global financial meltdown before anyone actually believed him. This is the story of the biggest fraud in Wall Street history. But honestly, it's not really about the con man. It's about the guy who figured him out on day one and then spent a decade screaming into the void. Let's start with the guy you think this story is about, Bernie Madoff. Don't picture some guy in a cheap suit with a fake Rolex. Madoff started with $5,000 he saved up as a lifeguard in the 60s. He built a real, legitimate brokerage firm. He became chairman of NASDAQ. He didn't just play the market, he ran the exchange. He even advised the SEC itself on electronic trading regulation. Think about that for a second. This is a man regulators went to for advice on how to catch guys like him. And that's exactly what made his trap so brilliant. His investment arm wasn't open to just anyone. You couldn't walk in and hand over your money, you had to be invited. Madoff turned people away, and that's what built the aura. Country club referrals, whispers of, if you can get a meeting with Bernie. Here's a rule worth remembering: the best con men don't chase you, they make you chase them. And everybody bit, everybody, except one guy who couldn't care less about the reputation. From here, the story splits in two. One track is Bernie, building the greatest financial illusion of the century. The other is a guy named Harry Markopolos, spending 9 years trying to get anyone in power to listen. Madoff's genius wasn't promising you'd get rich, it was promising you'd never lose. His strategy had a named split strike conversion, technical enough that nobody outside finance was going to argue with it. And the returns were boring on purpose, a steady 10 to 12% a year, not 50%, no wild swings. Here's the twist you're not expecting: his success wasn't built on greed, it was built on boredom, on fear of loss. Real markets go up and down. Madoff's returns climbed in a calm, suspiciously perfect straight line, year after year, recessions included. That should have been the biggest red flag in financial history. Instead, it became the entire pitch: with Bernie, you sleep at night. So what was actually happening behind the curtain? No real trading, none. New investor money simply paid out old investors. A classic Ponzi scheme, just wrapped in the prestige of a former NASDAQ chairman instead of run out of somebody's garage. And here's the red flag nobody caught: his auditor was a 3-person accounting firm working out of a strip mall, for a fund managing tens of billions of dollars. But who's going to double-check the guy who used to run the stock exchange? Now meet Harry Markopolos. He wasn't a cop, he wasn't a hero. He worked at a rival firm, and his boss asked him to reverse engineer Madoff's strategy so they could compete with it. Harry sat down to do the math. And almost immediately, he realized, this doesn't work, it's mathematically impossible. 1999, he raises the alarm for the first time. His math showed that to generate those returns legitimately, Madoff would have needed to trade more options contracts than physically existed on the entire market. Harry files a report with the SEC, basically saying, guys, this doesn't add up. Nothing happens. 2001, he tries again. More detail, harder evidence. 2005, he sends a formal, 21-page document. It later gets nicknamed the world's largest hedge fund is a fraud. It lays out, almost word for word, exactly how the scheme worked, the cash flow, the fake returns, the fact that it would collapse the second too many people asked for their money back at once. Silence again. At one point, Markopolos got so convinced Madoff might be tied to organized crime, because how else does a scheme this size stay hidden this long, that he started genuinely worrying about his own safety. And here's the part that should make you angry: the SEC did investigate Madoff, more than once. Every single time, they closed the case. Not because Markopolos was wrong, because nobody senior enough took a 4-hour math problem seriously. One man saw the truth in an afternoon. It took the American regulatory system 9 years to catch up to him. While Harry kept getting ignored, the machine kept running. Billions more poured in. Pension funds, charities, banks that should have known better. Even Elie Wiesel's foundation invested, trusting a name everybody trusted. And the scheme didn't collapse because of an investigation. It collapsed because of bad luck. The 2008 financial crisis hit. Panicked investors everywhere started pulling their money out, including from Madoff. A Ponzi scheme only survives as long as new money coming in outpaces money going out. For the first time in decades, that stopped being true. The math Harry Markopolos had been shouting about for 9 years finally caught up with reality. Not because anyone investigated it, but because the entire global economy accidentally tripped over it. And when it all finally came down, it wasn't the SEC that ended it. It wasn't Harry, it was Bernie's own family. December 2008. Madoff's cornered. He confesses to his 2 sons. In his own words, he calls the whole thing one big lie. The next day, his sons turn him in. Sit with that for a second. 9 years of warnings from an outsider, ignored. One conversation with his own kids, and it's over in 24 hours. Madoff gets arrested, later sentenced to 150 years. On paper, $65 billion vanished. The real losses to actual people were closer to $17 to $20 billion. But numbers don't have feelings. Behind them are wiped-out pension accounts, charities that shut their doors for good, retirees who lost everything over one phone call. $65 billion is an abstraction, a retirement account going from 7 figures to 0 overnight. That's something you can actually feel. So who's the real main character of this story? You want to say Bernie. He's the one who stood trial, got 150 years, and died in prison in 2021. But the real story is Harry Markopolos, the guy who did the math right the very first time, back in 1999, and then spent 9 years watching the world ignore him, right up until it was too late for it to matter. Markopolos is still alive, still chasing ghosts that don't exist on any balance sheet. He once said, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled." And the really scary part, he's still right. We just don't know about which one yet. This story is over, but the questions it raises, they're just getting started. For more deep dives into money, power, and the systems that control us, subscribe to Forbidden's Wealth. We'll see you there.